All right, everyone, welcome. Hi, and thanks for stopping by. So we are here to talk a little bit about application IV&V. It's a kind of a government acronym you hear a lot, independent verification and validation, using Chef Automate and Inspec with federal clients. So my name is Nicholas Mallon. I'm a cloud DevOps engineer at Nightpoint Systems, and I primarily work with clients in Department of Homeland Security, but in the past I've worked with departments of state and defense.
Hi, hello. My name is Marcelo Zambrana. I'm a cloud solution architect over at Microsoft. I specialize in application development and infrastructure. I joined Microsoft like 5 months ago, give or take. But before that, I was working with Nick, with government clients, where we were building all the required infrastructure and tooling in order to automate the government clients' deployments into on-prem or multiple clouds. And we are here to share some things we learned along the way.
So we want to take just a few minutes to talk about the types of problems that we face, in particular with the government space, when working on infrastructure and trying to do a lot of deployments with hundreds of apps per agency. So the main one that I'm sure you guys are here to hear about is compliance. Compliance is essential to our operations in the federal space. It is ingrained in everything that we do because we have so many stakeholders that have a say in how our builds work, how our infrastructure works. Just on this simple list here, we've got quality assurance managers whom get to take the QA environment, manually inspect it, and then say, nope, that's not going to production. We've got the contractor and agency ISOs that have a security standpoint there that can say, hey, I don't think that your infrastructure meets these controls, that's not going to production. Of course, SOC teams and then project managers themselves, if they just decided that that's not the way the infrastructure should look today. In addition, we've got the specific control guidelines that have been developed by multiple agencies. You've heard some of them probably at other talks today. You've heard about DISA STIGs, the Defense Information Systems Agency Security Technical Implementation Guides, I believe I got it all, which are public knowledge and can be used for looking at different operating systems or middleware stacks. But there's also individual agency handbooks or systems guides. The one I'm most intimately familiar with is DHS 4300A for sensitive systems, as well as the common NIST controls that are used both in commercial as well as government industry. But there are a couple other problems that we face. Marcelo?
Yeah, so cloud sprawl. As you know, typically it occurs when an organization lacks visibility into or control over its cloud resources, but also could be referred as uncontrolled proliferation of cloud providers, which are used with different departments within an organization. Like, for example, the software development team might be using Azure for compute and storage resources, but the research team might be using GCP for big data and analytics, right? As a result, we end up with credential proliferation. Most of the times, developers creating dev and test environments that they sometimes forget about it, right? And how many of you, for example, woke up in the morning, log into their favorite cloud provider portal and find out there are multiple resources that were created overnight that nobody knows about them? What are they for? And they are not tagged, right? Because of this, security has a difficult time making sure all of these resources comply with organization common controls, like the ones Nick is going to talk about us.
So, of course, there have been a lot of initiatives. Some of you working in the federal space might have heard about them using specifically called common controls, something that could be used across the entire government, across all agencies, as a set of standards that would always work on any infrastructure that is provisioned for the government. There have been a lot of attempts at this, a lot of initiatives under many administrations, and a lot of people would say that they've by and large either failed or not really materialized in the way that anyone's truly happy with. So common controls are something that, because we don't really have them, we end up having to build these solutions like the one that we want to talk about today. So I'm going to hand it over to Marcelo to talk a little bit about a general architecture that we might see with a government client.
Okay, so just quick survey. How many of you just only use on-prem? Just one? Good. And how many on-prem plus one cloud provider? Yeah. And how about on-prem and one or more cloud providers, like 3? Yeah. So yeah, that's usually the case, and that's what I want to show here, right? If you remember before, when it was just on-prem, it was really hard to get a complete, accurate report of your current security and compliance status, right? Everything was done manually. That means someone had to SSH or RDP into the servers and manually do those changes, right? Most of the time, those changes were tracked either on paper or Word or Excel documents at best case, right? So it was hard. So having said that, what we want to show here, it is a generic solution, a cloud-agnostic solution that could be deployed either on-prem or any cloud vendor. But for this specific demo, we are deploying everything in Azure, and we're taking advantage of Chef managed solution, which is just one-click deployment that's easy to use. All right? What we want to provide here, it is an automated, centralized place solution where security guys can have all the information they need when they need it, all right? And have complete visibility of all cloud resources, and actually any resources for that matter. So that's what we want to reflect here, and that's what I want to show you. So this is just one of the pipelines we have. This is for our custom Inspec profiles. But in real life, you probably have multiple CI/CD pipelines, right? You might have one for your application. You might have another one for your infrastructure. And probably your cookbooks have their own CI/CD pipeline. But again, this one is just for our specific custom Inspec profiles that we're using. So, and we are using pipelines because we want to automate all these changes. We want to make all these deployments and updates faster, right? We want to have a complete, we want to provide actually a workflow, right? That shows history and evolution of all these controls, right? And taking advantage of PRs, for example, in GitHub, we want to be able to review and approve these controls before they are applied, right? We also want to make faster deployments on remediations, right? For example, if a server comes up or any resource that is not in compliance, we don't want someone SSH or RDP into the server and do those changes manually, right? We want to be really fast on these changes. We want to be proactive instead of reactive. So using tools like Chef Automate, Chef Infra, Chef Inspec, and some specialized cookbooks we have, we are able to achieve this. But Nick is going to tell us a bit more why we're using Chef.
Right, so here we are, ChefConf 2019, hopefully having a really great time. But you know, we really take it seriously when we're offering solutions to government clients on what tools we're picking and how we're using them and how we're employing them. One of the things I really appreciate about Chef is its proven track record with DISA control specifications. There's a large user community in the federal space that's currently using DISA stigs that are written with Inspec and applied to thousands and thousands of servers across many clients. There's also already built by Chef, when you're using Automate 2, I believe, only, already built Stig specifications for a variety of operating systems, as well as middleware platforms that are very common in the federal space, like Apache, JBoss, or a couple other common ones. In addition, contrary possibly to what, if you're not in the federal space, contrary to popular belief, open source is actually really important to the government lately. It's a big initiative based on embracing community support, embracing the large user community that knows that if they're constantly working with this infrastructure at scale, it's also very likely that these open source tools are going to be kept up to date for a lot of like vulnerabilities, or have rich new features brought by both the community and by the vendor. And additionally, cost savings are really important to the government. So we're trying to figure out the best way to bring enterprise configuration management, getting those best features and licensing out that part, but also making sure that we're leveraging open source for as much as possible. So using tools like Chef Client and Chef Infra to achieve that. But there's some other reasons why we're using Chef, and I think Marcel's really interested in those.
Yeah, so in addition to what Nick said, we also use Chef because of the great innovations they have, like cloud integrations, which makes easier to integrate with all three major cloud providers, not just to scan the VMs they have there, but the cloud itself. Like, for example, scan for OpenS3 buckets, right? There is always one open out there, right? We know about it, and things like that, which is really easy. And with the latest version that we're going to show later, you can see that the UI is new. You have one of the things I like the most is the event feed, which gives you a complete visibility and history of your Chef environment. Like one thing that I hated was who bootstrapped this node, right? Or who uploaded this cookbook, right? It was really hard to track. Or who created this role? Nobody knew. So, but with these new innovations in these new versions, that's easy to see. And webhooks that you can use in order to integrate third-party applications like ServiceNow, Slack, or Jira. And lastly, but not least, Chef is doing a great job with partners. So they provide like one-click deployment, like we're using in Azure. They have the same for other vendors, right? So that's some of the things that we like about why using Chef.
So I want to show you guys just a top-level view, right, of how Chef fits inside our general solution. So we are looking at bringing in Chef Infra for your basic configuration management hardening. Those are things that we really value. We're doing a large-scale deployment in federal space. We really appreciate Automate for its compliance orchestration capabilities. It's also easily connected to other parts of the enterprise, to security, to the developers teams, to infrastructure operations, maintenance folks. And then, of course, we're bringing in Inspec, which has that careful and precise enumeration of controls based on DISA STIGs, based on our modifications to those STIGs or the way we're extending them. But one of the things we are very fascinated by and we're really glad is built into Automate now are the cloud integrations, which allow us to seamlessly gather all of the infrastructure provisioned by any team member in any cloud account for the three major cloud vendors and populate that information into Automate and automatically get it scanned. This is really helping us rein in cloud sprawl, which I think we're going to get to a bit later.
So Chef Automate comes with built-in profiles, 100 plus right now, but which you can apply and use them right away. But it will be just too good to be true to just use them, and especially in our experience with the government, we have to customize them, right? It is a nice solution. You can start with those, get a generic information about your environment, just use one and scan and see how are the results, and start making improvements to them, right? But in our demo is we are using a custom profile based on a stick profile that we got from Chef Automate, right? And at the end of the day, that's what you want to do, right? You want to customize these profiles to tailor to your specific environment or organization. And if you are also using these profiles to scan your cloud environment itself, not just VMs, for sure you will have some modifications. Like you might need to make sure some ports are not open, right? Like specific tags need to be applied everywhere on every resource, things like that. So we have to extend these profiles. And if we go to the next one, so who was yesterday on Galen Emery and Jon Snow talks about handling exception? And that's his real name, Jon Snow. That was really cool. So they had a similar session about this, but they were using Habitat. And they also showed this, right? This is the actual one of the controls from the stick that we are using. As you can see, well, this slide was meant to be ugly because XML is ugly, right? I don't know who likes XML, but I don't like it. But as you can see, it's really hard to understand what's it doing, what's it controlling, what's the check, right? And for sure, security is not going to read this and is not going to understand it. So if we move to the next slide and we see it translated into in the spec, as you can see, it's clean, it's easy, and it's human readable. And it's most likely that security is going to work with you on these controls in this format, that they can read and they can even make recommendations, modifications, provide feedback, things like that. So that's why we're using Inspec, because of this clarity that you can see right now, right? So right now, yeah, I think that's one of the major reasons. And if you didn't go to John Snow and Galen Emery talks. I recommend it highly because they also talk in a lot more detail about this.
So to really extend this, though, right, we're using these chef tools, we're using Inspec. We still, as we were talking about earlier with that lack of a common control system, need to bring automation into play and a little bit of custom work. The first major play in automation that we're employing is, of course, the automate cloud integrations. That's our main way of addressing cloud sprawl, right? If we have lots of credentials floating around, lots of new infrastructure popping up, we can rein that in and get better visibility through the cloud integrations. But we end up having to write some custom tooling, right? And one of the ways that we're doing that is using the webhooks and the node integrations capabilities with Automate. So that's webhooks, that's the Slack notification. And that's a great way to start bridging that gap between the infrastructure that's provisioned by teams and actually notifying them and making sure they understand when they're making non-compliant infrastructure, and also notifying them when we go ahead and fix it and when there's changes like that. But also, the integrations are great when we have to use those manual workflows because compliance said so, because it's Section 508, or if it's 4300 POAM and DHS, right? When you need to have a person sign into that server and take a look, you can use webhooks to send tickets or to send new tickets into ServiceNow, automatically put that on someone's desk. Additionally, when we want to look at automated resolution and remediation of security incidents, we're looking at serverless options. You know, every time Marcelo and I go to a government client site and we're developing a new solution, we always say, how are we going to automate it as that first part? You know, we're not looking for new manual solutions. That would just bury the government under more work. So we like using serverless functions as a way of using event-driven systems and event-driven architectures that take notifications from Automate that there are non-compliant systems and automatically applying remediation, whether that's with applying a hardening role or cookbook or something of that nature. But there's a couple other ways that automation fits in.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, we just want to make the security work easier, right? We want to work with them and provide the information they need when they need it. And we don't want them to wait weeks or months to have that information. We want to know when a resource, it doesn't matter if it's on-prem or any cloud, is not following organizations' guidelines, best practices, and common controls, right? We want to know as soon as possible when it's not too late. We want to be proactive, not reactive. We also want to provide better metrics, right? We want to provide reports for auditing, remediation history, basically the whole life cycle of the resource since it was created. And lastly, we want to be flexible. We want to be able to accept changes, updates, as the organization evolves, right? That's always the case. So if you want to see it in action, I think Nick has a really cool demo for us. But lastly, I just want to say that this whole process and the goal here is just first to gather and structure the data, learn from it, and as Nick said, automate it.
Absolutely. So yeah, let me go ahead and show you guys a quick little demo of what we are working on. So I have here, just to start things off, because we love to automate everything and overuse CI tools, got a quick job that's just built some nodes for us, kind of similar to like an application that we'd be deploying in federal space, right? Let's say it's a multi-cloud where you're trying to utilize certain services in each cloud that are beneficial to the application. And then you've got cross connections between them. We then bootstrap that infrastructure. And then, of course, because of our cloud integrations, these nodes were automatically detected by Chef Automate, which I think Marcelo wants to run through.
Oh, yeah. So this is the Chef Automate I was telling you about that we deploy in Azure with just one-click deployment solution they have. And they have for other cloud vendors as well, right? One of the things I like a lot is this event feed, that you can have a complete history, what's going on with your Chef environment. As you can see, we created nodes just before the demo, and we were testing, delete, create, things like that. And probably somewhere in there we have some cookbooks, roles, things like that. So basically everything that you do in your Chef infrastructure. We can also see Chef client runs. We have nice information about them. Right now, you can see that we have 3 nodes, one on each cloud, right? And when was the last time the run list was executed, right? Right now for this demo, I think we said like every minute.
Really low. Way too low for production.
So you guys can see the remediation part mostly, right? And we have, next we have the asset store. This is our custom profile that we created and we are deploying. But as you can see, you can get a lot more from the asset store, right? The CIS for Windows, Red Hat, Ubuntu, and probably down there is Stick. So many. And they keep updating these with each release, which is awesome. And let me go to settings. In settings, we have we are working with the webhooks, as you can see with Slack. But the thing that matters here is the cloud integrations. As you can see, we have integrations with Amazon, Azure, and GCP. It is really easy, right? Usually in Amazon, it's just the access keys that you can get. In Azure, it's the service principal. And in GCP, it's just JSON file with the credentials for the service account. Right? So it's really easy to do. And I love it. So finally, Nick is going to talk about compliance. As you can see, we have the 3 nodes. They are failing, of course. And here are the 3. And yeah, you can see they are failing. So Nick is going to show us how we can fix them really fast.
So we've got a couple nodes here. It just came up. The application team, of course, they have access to do continuous delivery and deployments into dev test environments. So of course, they made brought these nodes up, but without our hardening specification that we have industry-wide, or at least agency-wide, right? So how are we going to remediate this? Well, typically, we would want to do an automated solution here, right? One of those ones that we were just discussing. But typically, when we are doing our first steps out with a client, right, we get Automate set up, we start using these cloud integrations. We have to do a little bit of debugging to figure out what our automated process would be. So in this case, it's a little bit wired since I happen to know what's going on. And it turns out that we've got a particular role, the web role, that if we inspect it, is missing the hardening configuration that is mapped directly back to our STIGs. And of course, the main reason why we're using something like this is because we want that customizability. We want either those exemptions or also those custom controls that might only exist in certain agencies. So if I go ahead and add the hardening config, cool. Now that role is automatically going to be applied to that infrastructure. As we all know, using Chef Infra and using our very low Chef client interval, we're going to get a fresh check-in. Of course, in typical solutions that we develop, we tend to have more of a node-centric approach rather than a centralized one. That way our nodes can, they know to automatically check in and get updated configurations using other tools like using Habitat, for example. So if we take a look here, we're just going to have to wait a tad bit while we get our new information from the nodes. But in the meantime, I think it would be great to talk about what other kinds of things that we tend to extend, right? Like we've got a lot of situations, I know Marcel brought it up earlier, with like ports and whatnot, that are just agency or application specific. And it's really important that we're extending that across applications. And
again, some other integrations that we've seen is that it could trigger something else, right? Probably you need to have approval before doing this. So you can trigger a webhook that is integrated with Jira or ServiceNow. So that change can be approved and then could be back and fixed, right? I think yesterday's demo, exception handling is showing some integration with ServiceNow. But I think the demo didn't work, but I blame it on ServiceNow. But again, so you can customize this a lot more if you need manual intervention before these things are applied. So as you can see, I think Amazon already passed.
Yeah, 1 down, 2 to go. You know how demos go. But yeah, so that's just a real sense of the speed that we're getting here, right? We're getting this automated remediation. We're getting there really quickly. We're getting to that environment and getting a better compliant picture as soon as possible for our ISOs. So let's see if these guys check in a little faster. But one at a time. don't think. One more. It's just Azure. Come on.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just wait for it. But as you can see, so it doesn't matter if you're running on cloud, any cloud.
You can still get your remediation process
And we can apply these remediations, right? So again, we want to provide something that is cloud agnostic, because in most cases, especially in our experience, it's not just one cloud that the government is using. It's usually one or two, sometimes three, and they have on-prem on top of that. So we want to provide a solution that is generic enough that you can solve these issues. It doesn't matter where your environment is. Okay? So I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we're just going to take it forward. But in general, what we tried to do is more of an automated-based solution. It just didn't sort of fit the demo super well for that. But I would be happy to talk to you guys a little bit about some of the other ways that we are trying to remediate noncompliance, right? So one of the ways that we have been developing that I mentioned before is using serverless functions, right? Taking large batch checks against Automate using their API and figuring out where we've got non-compliant nodes on a rolling basis and then applying remediation or hardening to those instances. But that's not always the perfect solution with the customer, especially in government space. We tend to have certain mandatory manual processes. For example, if there's a non-hardened piece of production infrastructure, we cannot apply an automated remediation to it. We just aren't allowed to for compliance reasons. So we want to automatically generate a ticket, drop that into ServiceNow, and get a Linux or Windows admin over to that system as soon as possible to apply remediation and schedule downtime if necessary. We're also packaging this solution inside our CI/CD pipelines. We work very closely with dev teams in our typical deployments. We really enjoy that type of work. I think it's really fun. But we also want to make sure that they're building compliant infrastructure. We give them a lot of latitude by allowing them to have continuous deployment inside the government, where they're using a lot of tools like Terraform or Packer in order to generate infrastructure, like provision it, and then use things like Chef to configure and manage everything on that server. So with that much latitude, we need to rein them in, usually with like a QA kind of test built into pipelines, where infrastructure is built, it checks in to Automate, the controls are examined, and then a webhook report goes back to Jenkins saying this was not compliant, and thus the build stops, doesn't even get fired off to the next environment. So that's just some of the ways that we've been doing it. But so I think, Marcel, you have some ideas for next steps?
Yeah, so next steps. So what we show here is just a small part of a big solution that we'll be working with Nick for our government clients. But it is still evolving, right, as always. Things change, different applications, different requirements, new environments, things like that. So at the end of the day, our plan is to share these things we have learned working with the government, try to open source as much as we can, and hoping that with this, it will help you, or you can either build on top of it or create something new. And these are our links for our GitHub repos. That's the GitHub repo where we are going to upload everything. I'm sure Nick is going to push the latest changes today.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
If he doesn't go to the party. But yeah, so looking forward to it. That's our contact information. And if you guys have any questions, please.
Yeah, we'd happy to take them. But yeah, that's it for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Run this over here.
You mentioned talking about knowing or having Automate know when there's new nodes spun up automatically.
Right.
Is that only through the pipeline processes when that happens? Or if something happens outside of pipeline, if somebody spins up a new node in the environment, is that being captured as well by Automate?
Yes, so that's a good question. So with Chef Automate integrations that I showed, yeah, it can scan any new VM that was created on any of those environments automatically. It doesn't matter if you created using the pipeline. It could be a rogue developer creating a VM.
No matter where it comes
No
from.
matter what time or where, it will pick it up.
Is that cloud integration?
Yes.
That's cloud integration.
Any region, yeah, at the moment.
Any region, any cloud, so you just need to configure. Right now, we have it set to just scan specific regions, East US, but you can check all of them if you want to.
Wherever you're at.
Yep. Any more questions?
No?
Okay.
I think we're good.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, guys.